Today in the shop, I'm building some of these really simple DIY Christmas trees. Now, these make really great gifts. They're also an excellent side hustle opportunity to bring in some extra cash around the holidays. And we all know we could use a little extra cash these days. I'm going to be sharing with you my tips and tricks to increase your productivity so you can make dozens of these in a day. I'm also going to show you how I build a premium version of these trees using hardwood and some slightly different building techniques. This premium version is really going to set you apart from your competitors. Now for the basic version, I just need a piece of 1x3 pine that is 8 feet long, and this is enough to do both of my trees. All the parts for our trees are going to get cut out at the miter saw. I'm going to lock the saw in at 30 degrees, and all of our parts will get cut at this angle. We'll also be using a stop block to make sure that all of our parts are uniform. Our first cut is to remove the square end of the board, since we're not going to need that. Important note here, after each cut we're going to flip the piece over so that the bevel is resting back against the fence of the miter saw. Here's an important safety tip. Make sure the saw has come to a complete stop before raising the blade. Otherwise, you might get a nasty kickback and probably ruin another pair of shorts. Now to build our trees, we need the following parts. We need one piece cut to 12 inches long, one piece cut to 6 3/4 of an inch long, 7 pieces cut to 6 inches, one piece cut to 4 3/4 of an inch, and 6 pieces cut to 4 inches. Now make sure that you're flipping the board after every cut so that we have all the angles going in the right direction. All right, all of the parts for our trees are done now, but before we get into the assembly, I want to take a few minutes to get these sanded down good, remove these horrible stickers that they put on the wood, smooth out all of the sharp edges, get everything rounded over so it's nice and finished before we do the assembly. My oscillating spindle sander is really going to help out here. It's only going to take me about 2 minutes to knock all of these out and get all these sanded down and ready for assembly. To get started with the assembly, first I'm going to clamp a board to my bench to give me a good flat reference surface. I also have my glue and some brad nails to put everything together with. All right, I'm going to bring you in for this over the shoulder look so you can see exactly what I'm doing here. First, we'll need our 12-inch piece. This is going to be the bottom of our tree. Then you'll need 2 of our 6-inch pieces, and these are going to make the lower limbs. Now what I see a lot of people doing is they're struggling here to keep this in place so that they can get a good tight joint on these lower limbs, which doesn't make sense to me because, come on, we're in a wood shop. That's what we have clamps for. So I'm going to clamp this in place. Now, that's not going to go anywhere, and I can get a good tight joint while I put in my brad nails. So, I'm just going to add my glue to both these pieces and tack them in place. Now, where most people would go from here is take their next 2 6-inch pieces and add the next set of limbs. However, that's not what I'm going to do, because actually the most critical part now is the top. And if you build the tree from the bottom up, you don't have any support to make sure that you get a good tight joint at the very top. So instead, I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to take one of my 6-inch pieces, clamp that here. Then I take this 6 3/4 inch piece and it goes right here so I can clamp this and have a nice tight joint. And right there we have the top of our tree. Now I can bring back in the bottom, clamp it back in place, then take my other 2 6-inch pieces. I can start working on getting everything aligned here, and these joints have a little bit more play in them now that we have the critical ones already glued together. Now we can remove our clamp. I'm just going to mark a quick center line here and here. Add a bit of glue and tack it in place. There we have one tree. And the smaller tree gets assembled in the same manner. Just with this one, the different sizes, the 6-inch piece is your bottom, your 4-inch pieces go on the sides, 4 3/4 goes on the top, and the last 4-inch piece is your base. All right, so now I want to add a stain to darken these up a bit, but before I do, I'm going to add some pre-stained wood conditioner. Now I have a full video explaining exactly why I do this before I add the stain. If you're interested in that, I'll leave a link down in the description below so you can check that out. After the stain is fully dried, I'm going to add a couple of coats of lacquer to seal this in. So while we're waiting on the finish to dry on these, let me show you what I would do differently if I was making these out of hardwood to make a more premium product. And for the premium version, I have some cherry offcuts that just require a little bit of milling to get down to nominal size. Now, in case you weren't aware, a 1x3 board that you pick up from the hardware store isn't actually 1 inch thick and 3 inches wide. That is the nominal thickness. The actual dimensions are 3/4 of an inch by 2.5. I just want to throw that out there so that you understand why I'm milling my cherry to 3/4 of an inch by 2.5. Now, if you thought that was confusing, wait until you go to an actual hardware dealer and you find out that they don't use inches at all, and 1-inch board is actually 4/4, a 2-inch board is 8/4, and they don't measure anything relative to length. It's all measured by board foot, which is actually a unit of volume.
You just blew my mind.
Now here at the miter saw, we're still using the 30-degree angle, and all of the dimensions that we used previously are going to carry over. We're going to make the exact same cuts as we did before. Now that we have all of our parts cut out, it's time to take care of all of the sharp edges. Instead of doing a sanded round over this time, I think these would look a lot better with a sharp chamfer instead of that rounded edge. To do this, you could run these over at the router table and knock it out, but I think I'm going to actually use my small block plane, just a couple of swipes on each edge, and you'll be good to go. All right, so now let's talk about assembly. Now, since this is a premium version, I want to do something a little bit different with the assembly. I don't want to use the brad nails because I don't want the visible holes in the sides of our trees. Now, we could use a wood filler, but it's still going to be pretty obvious that we had some brad nails driven in here. So we have to look at another option. Now, we can't really use clamps because of the complex joinery of the tree. It's going to be very difficult to get the clamps to apply pressure in all the correct directions to make sure that we get tight joints. And for the same reason, I don't want to use dowels, biscuits, or dominoes because it's going to be very difficult to set those up to get the proper orientation to close up the joint. So what other option do we have? Well, I've got one more trick that I'm going to show you now. All right, so this setup should look pretty familiar. We've got the bottom of our tree clamped to our reference piece ready to go, and our two sides ready to get glued on. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some wood glue onto our side piece just like before. But this time I'm going to leave a little space without any of the wood glue. That's where I'm going to use some of this thick CA glue and dab some of that on here. Now I can take our activator spray and I'm going to spray the opposite piece. Now this is going to create an instant bond with this CA glue, and that's going to serve as our brad nails or our clamp to hold this in place while the wood glue dries. Now we have to use the wood glue here as well because CA glue by itself is pretty brittle and it's not going to hold up over the long term. And after a few seconds, that's held in place and we can move on to the next piece. So I'll assemble the rest of the tree using this technique in the same order as before. Now when it comes to cherry, it really benefits from a good oil-based finish. It's just going to bring out the color and the depth of the wood. So I have some Osmo here. This is a hard wax oil. This is one of the easiest finishes in the world to apply. To apply it, I just need a white Brillo pad, and I'm going to use that to just scrub the oil into the wood. You want to do this very lightly. It takes very little of this finish. It'll go a long ways. Once you've scrubbed it all into the wood, you just come back with a clean cloth and just wipe away the excess, and that's it. This is really, really simple. This is one of those finishes that you really have to try hard and go out of your way to really screw up. Now, these wooden trees are extremely popular, both with woodworkers and with customers. And I can see why. They're a lot of fun to build and they actually look really nice. And these are just a couple of the variations that you can do. These two were pine. I did an early American and a walnut stain. And of course we have the solid cherry. And this one is by far my favorite of the three. But let me know in the comments below, which one is your favorite? The walnut, early American, or the solid cherry? Make sure you go check out some of my other videos, and I'll see you in the next one.